All right, man, peace. So now this will be part two in regards to the Magic Johnson and Isiah Thomas relationship rejuvenation, revival, and I'm happy for the brothers. Now, we left off, we were talking about the All-Star game and Magic Johnson's assertion that he and Isiah Thomas were the ones who really pushed the NBA All-Star game into prominence, and it's correct because really the modern era of the NBA started in 1979 with the drafting of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, even though Larry Bird was actually drafted the year before. Of course, his rookie season was 79. And they're the ones who really pushed the NBA into the modern era. You had Bird and Magic who were drafted or whose rookie seasons were 79. And then I believe Kevin McHale came in the next season. And then Isiah Thomas came in 81. In 82, you had James Worthy and Dominique Wilkins. And then, of course, 84, you had Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, John Stockton, so on and so forth. 85, you had Karl Malone and Patrick Ewing. So that's pretty much how the NBA was able to revive itself. And also, I believe now that I remember, I believe that Clyde Drexler came in 83, and also in 84 was the great Hakeem Olajuwon. Let me not forget him. So those were the players that really created the modern NBA as we know it. Because in 1979, that's when you started to have the NBA be more visible. So that relates to Magic Johnson's assertion that he and Isiah Thomas were heavily responsible for promoting the NBA through the All-Star game. And I think that the style of play that many of the modern day players use in the All-Star game is kind of a disregarding of the game. They kind of take for granted how important that game is as a showcase. But it's also symptomatic of the soft mindset of the modern day NBA. Everybody just wants to take a 30-foot jump shot. And that's not good for that game.
Right. But it was just special, man, in the way we always pulled for each other.
Isiah Thomas and Magic Johnson.
Y'all did not always pull for each other, unless you're talking about you and Isiah.
They said, despite the condition of Magic Johnson, that they would handle everything just as they always said.
You know, all of us.
Why was you so generous to us? I mean, coming in, right? I mean, really, like you had just won the championship. You was the MVP, and you grabbed Mark and I.
Mark Aguirre, who should be in the Hall of Fame. If Tracy McGrady's in the Hall of Fame, Mark Aguirre should be in the Hall of Fame. All right? For people who doubt that, please look up Mark Aguirre's stats from 1981 up until about 1988. Look up his stats.
I mean, all eyes this big. You got the gold bins with the tinted window.
Swaggin'.
I never forget when you jumped out. I was like, but, looking back, and it's been 25, 30 years, but looking back, the throne that you was on, and the pathway and the doorway that you opened.
This is a very nice photo right here. For those of you brothers who remember, I did a video called Ben Franklin versus the Black Germans. And we delved into the meaning of certain words like swarthy and tawny. And we were able to decipher and discern the meaning. And when you look at Magic Johnson's complexion as well as Isiah Thomas, you see that they have kind of a golden brown complexion. That is what was known as fuscus in ancient Rome. All right, also known as dusky. When you hear that term dusky, D-U-S-K-Y, that's in reference to the so-called black man. But we'll be delving into that in some of the other videos. But I just wanted to bring that out when you look at this photo here.
That you opened for all of us, right? You didn't have to, right? You took a lot of time with us. You say you was showing us how to win. We say you was cheating.
That's showing you how to win, though.
Yeah. But I, why did you do it?
Well, I think, first, the love I had and still have for all of you guys. Second, God blessed me, right, with an opportunity. Whoever thought this poor kid from Lansing, Michigan, who had so many doubters that no way you could make it to the NBA.
Now you look at Magic Johnson's afro. I mean, this is a digression, but for you brothers who read the scriptures, another way that you could tell that the people of the book were so-called black is if you remember the story of Absalom, who used to poll his hair every year. Remember, he got into a civil war with his father David, and he ended up getting captured because he rode his horse under a tree and his hair got caught in the branches above the tree. Why is that? Because he had an afro, an extremely large afro, very similar to the one that Magic Johnson was shown to have while he was in high school.
No way you could do
And by the way, when I went to Lansing, I thought all y'all was rich. Coming from where I came from, I was like, what you mean y'all poor? Y'all rich.
Yeah, and we were like, yeah, right. But I think that it's just the way we were raised. You know, I give that to my parents. You know, they always were about helping a neighbor, helping, you know, somebody else. And so my thing was, you can't just keep the knowledge to yourself.
Agreed.
Yourself. You can't keep those things. You got to give those. Somebody gave it to me, right? Terry Furlow, right. Benny White, George Gervin gave it to us. Yeah. Big time.
The Iceman, probably one of the top 30 players to ever play. This guy who scored like over 25,000 points. He just ran into Magic every year. Magic happened to have Kareem on his team. All right, but this is my point. There's a lot of great players that have come through the NBA. For people who want to act like, you know, how could you say Kobe Bryant is not top 10? Like, you know how many great players have come through the NBA, man?
Can't be Russell. On and on and on. Those guys took me aside and really said, hey, this is how you got to do it. So, you know, we had all those guys teaching, giving it to me. So my thing was to pay it forward, give it to you. And then look what you did. You passed it on. Mark passed it on. Herb passed it on. Dominique passed it on.
Now, you heard what Magic Johnson said? He said Mark Aguirre passed it on. Isiah Thomas, Herb Williams. For those of you who don't know, Herb Williams was a good center who played in the 80s, played with the Pacers, and he came to the Knicks. Then he backed up Patrick Ewing on the Knicks. And he said Dominique passed it on. So back then in the 80s, yes, players worked out together. It was dependent on your personality. Now, Magic Johnson had an extremely extroverted, friendly personality. You can't help that. And people who have similar personalities to him are going to be drawn to somebody like him. So yes, players worked out back then together. Yeah, certain players who stayed to themselves, but you know, people try to act like players only started to become friends since 2003. That's not true.
No, that's what you got to do. We're in a fraternity that is special, right? And you can't keep the knowledge to yourself. You got to pass it on to the other guys.
I agree, and that's one of the themes of this channel. That's why I call this a pro-truth channel. And that's why I also implore brothers to correct me if I make any factual errors. Because that's all I'm interested in, brothers. I'm only interested in facts. I'm not really interested in people's feelings and all this other shit. People get too captivated and encapsulated within the parameters of their feelings. And it stops them from being able to make rational evaluations. The only evaluations that are going to resonate are the ones that are made based on rationale. All right? Don't get me wrong, you don't have to walk around and be a robot. We all have feelings and emotions, so on and so forth, and those things have to be taken into account. But the number one evaluator is rationale, period. And that's why it makes sense when you have knowledge to pass it, because when you give other people information, that enables them to make appropriate decisions and learn how to think better. When people all around you think better, you don't have to worry about them making bad decisions that are going to affect you. And, you know, that's the point of having a community. If you keep information to yourself, then you make yourself the only one who can make good decisions. When people around you are making bad decisions, eventually that's going to affect you. That's why if you have information, you have to share it with others so that they can learn how to think on a higher level, so that it makes it easier to live around them.
Guys, but the difference between all of you guys, you did something with it. See, I think that Even all those games when you came to the finals to watch me play, you would just had your notebook up.
I was rooting for him. I definitely wanted him to do well. But also while I was rooting, I was observing, trying to learn as much as I possibly can.
Okay, that's what you're supposed to do. Okay, yeah. I saw that too. You used to always tell me that. We sit up at night when we beat the Celtics. You sit up and say, "Okay, why'd you do that? Or why did they? Okay, got it." And you be just in your mind writing the notes down. Yeah.
And let me say this also. Another reason why Magic Johnson was so free with information to Isiah is deep down, and he won't admit this, but deep down he never saw the Pistons becoming a threat to him. He would never have given information away to Larry Bird or anybody who he felt like was a threat. He looked at Isiah Thomas as like a little brother who would possibly have a chance somewhere far, far, far down the road. But he never looked at him as a real threat. So I think that's what kind of shocked Magic is by the late 80s when the Pistons rose up so fast, because their team was extremely intelligent. Their basketball IQ as a team was very high. When you have Chuck Daly, who, by the way, had a CIA background, very much like Greg Popovich, you have a brainiac like Isiah Thomas, an extremely intellectual player like like Joe Dumars. Then you have a nutcase genius like Dennis Rodman, who really did not understand himself of when he first got to the Pistons, but eventually he became a basketball savant and knew where everyone was supposed to be. Bill Laimbeer, high basketball IQ. So all these things I think kind of snuck up on Magic. I don't think he would have divulged all the shit that he divulged if he would have known that by the late 80s the Pistons would have been as good as they were. Because it probably cost him a couple of championships, to be honest with you. Because if we really want to go there, the Pistons should have beat them in 88 if it wasn't for Isiah Thomas's ankle injury.
And then look what happened. It was your turn, and you did what you had to do, back-to-back champions, because you were a student of the game. You watched how everybody else did it, and then you said, when it was my turn, I'm going to apply it, and that's what the beautiful thing of yourself, Mark, Dominique, Herb, that's what it was.
Well, let's be for real. Herb didn't do shit. And Dominique tried, but Dominique was not the brainiac that Isiah Thomas was. And Doc Rivers, who was a Chicago native and who knew Isiah Thomas very well, they both came in the league around the same time. Doc Rivers didn't have the talent to elevate the Hawks.
Was our club, we passed on knowledge to each other, but also we applied that knowledge and then we executed on it.
I was fortunate enough not only to learn from yourself, but also the Celtics.
Right.
So, in both of your organizations and all of you were very open to me. I mean,
yes, for those of you who don't know, a lot of you brothers probably know this already, especially a lot of the older brothers, but the Pistons the Celtics would let Isiah Thomas travel with them during the playoffs in the early 80s. When after the Pistons would get knocked out of the playoffs, they would allow Isiah Thomas to travel with them. So he became very familiar with many of their players. He became very friendly with many of their players, particularly Kevin McHale.
I mean, from Dr. Buzz to Jerry West.
He got that Chicago player outfit on.
West, to yourself, Red, Kevin, ML Carr. ML Carr still called me today messing with me.
ML Carr nutcase. That dude ML Carr flagrant fouled Dr. J. I can't remember what game it was. I saw it on YouTube. I believe it was in the 1980 playoffs or 81 playoffs, one of those games. He flagrant fouled the hell out of Dr. J while he was in the air. He totally submarined him.
But it's like y'all took us in, and not only did y'all beat us, but in the process of beating us, y'all wanted to teach it.
Well, that's the process, man. That's like the circle of sports. At least it was back then, before the players before they exercised many of the free agency rights that they have today. They used to teach by whooping ass, and that was the cycle. That did It's like in the Serengeti, a lion raises a cub, and the cub goes off and comes back and takes the pride away from it. All right, so now Isiah Thomas is going to ask Magic about some of his failures and what motivated him, what galvanized him to keep moving forward and to get up.
Right.
So my point is, and the question that I want to ask is, through all the ups and downs, how did you keep getting up,
Damn, Larry Bird got a face for radio.
getting up, and coming back?
Pain of losing. And that year, that was 84. You know, I had excelled every time. State high school championship, college championship, first year, 80, 82.
Well, let's be for real. You guys got swept in 83. All right? The Sixers whooped y'all asses in 83.
I never failed, you know, and it was my fault that we lost that championship.
Yeah.
That was my fault. I turned the ball over, made some bad decisions. And, man, I cried. Not only that night and the next night, but also all summer. Really.
All summer.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Stayed in the house a lot, too.
yeah.
Hey, sometimes in life, shit's gonna happen where sometimes you need to cry. That's why I don't begrudge a man. You know, you go off and you do your own thing and you get yourself together. Sometimes people hold in all that energy and it comes out in other ways. So sometimes it's healthy for people to do what they need to do and go ostracize themselves, isolate themselves, and get themselves together.
Yeah, we was worried because you got to remember, like, okay, me, Mark, we had never seen you fail.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was like, man, Magic lost. That was like, how could that happen?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
Well, he had just lost in 83. I mean, they got swept by the Sixers. So I'm guessing really they mean that Magic lost and it was his fault. Like the series pretty much in 84 came down to Magic making a bevy of errors in close games. Like he blew probably like 3 games. Out of the 4 games that they lost, if Magic had made better decisions, they probably would have won that series in 5, honestly.
right?
Yeah.
But to watch you just dig, you know, internally, and you know, you was quiet, you know, you was just going, and then you came back the next year.
And was hoping that we get them again.
LA comes to Boston and wins the world title.
And that's a testament not only to his inner fortitude, but also how he was raised by his parents. That's why it's very, very important to imbue a positive mentality. You know, a lot of people have never been raised to believe in themselves. And when they face any type of adversity, they just fold up and want to blame everybody else. Instead of dealing with the fact that they lost and they got to come back, man. That's just life. You know, I mean, shit. In life, you're going to get fired from jobs. Some broad going to get mad, try to bring confusion into your life. Those type of things are going to happen. You might even fall out with a family member or with a close friend. But you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. You may be able to reclaim that relationship. Look at Magic and Isiah Thomas. You can tell this is the first real time that they had an opportunity to talk out their issues and try to come back together. And they've had photograph opportunities together in between that falling out in the late 80s and now. So that shows you that during all that time period where they were taking photos together, all that shit wasn't real.
And Magic Johnson, who finds redemption, Tommy, as you say, a year later. One long year and redemption for one Magic Johnson. Now you can tell us just how much it bothered you a year ago when the Pistons choked in the championship series.
Well, it bothered me.
Damn, Brent Musburger. You can tell us about when you choked last year.
I mean, you know, anytime you make mistakes to probably lose a championship, it bothers you, you know, no question about it. See, self-evaluation is the hardest thing.
Yes, sir.
To critique yourself, to check off your weaknesses, that's hard for any person to do.
I agree. And you know, that's why the scriptures even tell you to evaluate yourselves every day. You know, tell you that in Romans, the 12th chapter. And that is definitely very, very difficult. But when you make a practice of it, then you never have to worry about somebody else doing it. It's better for us to evaluate ourselves than to have somebody else evaluate us. Because by the time someone else is evaluating you, you're probably near destroying yourself. Let's be for real. Many times we come across people who have these outstanding issues, flaws, psychological disorders, and we don't want to say anything because we don't want to get involved. You know, we live in a society where everybody's supposed to feel uncomfortable with, quote unquote, judging people. You have those who try to use the scripture in Matthew where they believe Christ is telling people not to judge. Christ never said not to judge. He said, don't judge people for what you yourself are doing, because that makes you a hypocrite. In other words, what? You can't tell somebody to put down a crack pipe and you a crackhead your damn self. That's what he was saying. So, point being is this. In order for us to avoid getting castigated by others, if we take a very critical approach to ourselves, nip a lot of shit in the bud, man. And beyond that, as so-called black people, you wouldn't be that worried about the so-called white man if you were more worried about yourself and your own. And this is one of the themes of this channel. One of the main reasons why so-called black people are always talking about the white man and the white woman is because they care about how the Caucasian thinks about them more than they care about what they think about their damn self. And definitely more than what they think about how other so-called black people think about them. So that's the reason why you have these constant circular racial discussions that go nowhere. So that's the importance of being able to evaluate yourself and to undress yourself, per se.
To do. So I had to go deep inside myself and say, hey, I'm not as good as I thought I was. I got to go back to the lab. I got to go to work. And so we went to work. We went to work that whole summer.
And hey, that's a great thing. That's why they became better. That's why Magic Johnson became a better person. So that's great for him. All right, so now Isiah Thomas is going to reflect on his own moment of self-evaluation.
So you and I, see, our careers parallel each other's because, you know, we thought we were going to play you guys, right?
Yeah, they should have in 87. And this is why, let me say this is why I can't put Isiah Thomas in my top 10. I had somebody come in my comments who said that he believed that Isiah Thomas was top 10, and you could definitely argue that. He's the greatest little man to ever play, and as I've stated, other than Michael Jordan, he's the only little man, non-big man, to lead his team to multiple championships without a dominant big man in a big man era. Okay? Those are the only two players to do that. Michael Jordan and Isiah Thomas are the only two players to lead their teams to multiple championships without a dominant big man in a dominant big man era. But why I cannot put Isiah Thomas in the top 10 is because of what he did in 1987 in Game 5, where they should have went to the finals. You know, I mean, you can make the case that Isiah Thomas could have 4 championships because they could have beat the Celtics in 87 and then went on to play the Lakers in the finals. Please keep in mind that Laker team went 6 games with the Celtics in the finals in 87, and Kevin McHale had a broken foot. Larry Bird had a bad back. Like, who knows what the Pistons could have done in 87 against the Lakers. And the Lakers didn't match up well with them. Pistons had a lot of speed, and they had a lot of interchangeability. No, they had 3 players who could play point and shooting guard, in Isiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, and Vinnie Johnson. They had 3 guys who could do that. Then you had, in 87, 88, you had Adrian Dantley, who was dominant in the low post. And you had a young Dennis Rodman, who probably could have been a gold medal decathlete. They would have gave them problems, and could have guarded Magic 94 feet. They would have gave them some problems, But Isiah Thomas had a brain freeze, and Larry Bird showed his greatness. That's why I said you cannot really judge Larry Bird over his lack of athleticism, because his brain worked so fast it made up for whatever foot speed he lacked, because he was thinking 2 steps ahead. He baited Isiah Thomas on that play, and he made up the distance so fast because he actually got a jump on him when Isiah Thomas telegraphed the pass on the inbounds.
And then we end up playing them.
And you was Tragic Magic, and then I became Tragic Isiah. Because you dribbled out the clock, made the mistake, then I threw the ball away.
Now that's a steal marker underneath the DJ.
Dennis Johnson is someone else who should be in the Hall of Fame. This is a guy, Dennis Johnson, who won, 2 championships with Boston and one with Seattle. Why isn't he in the Hall of Fame?